Have you ever wondered how a mighty empire could overlook the sheer tenacity of one less advanced world? Well, they did, and everything turned upside down. Let's begin with Ral Corvin, a war hero who had seen more than his fair share of battles across the galaxy. He stood before the highest council of the Aurelion Empire, a gathering of leaders who believed they had every corner of the cosmos under their thumb. Ral's eyes, weathered by countless campaigns, flashed with concern as he raised his voice to warn them about a planet they all regarded as primitive. Helia, he spoke with a certain edge, his chest decorated in metals that caught the light whenever he shifted. Everyone else in that grand hall seemed eager to move on to the next fight, but Ral's tone was as heavy as a collapsing star. He had witnessed Helian soldiers up close, and he knew their spirit was not something the Empire could swat away like an insect. While the younger officers smirked, General Urex, an imposing figure in elaborate ceremonial armor, let out a dismissive laugh. The general's attitude summed up the entire room's mindset. Helia, to them, was a tiny outpost, light years behind in technology and war machines. In their eyes, capturing it would be as easy as taking an unguarded outpost. Ral, however, refused to back down. He spoke with clarity, pointing out that Helian warriors were experts at improvisation. They took each disadvantage and used it like a hidden blade. General Urex just waved him off. His eyes burned with overconfidence as he declared that the invasion would proceed immediately. A hum of approval rippled through the council, sealing Helia's fate. Ral's stomach sank. He knew the price of arrogance in battle. As the meeting ended, Ral walked away with a sense of looming danger. He was certain this campaign wouldn't go the way the Empire predicted. Far away on Helia, Captain Jade Rook zipped her worn combat vest while looking at the horizon. The sky was ablaze with hues of orange and blue. It was strangely beautiful, considering they were on the brink of an invasion. Over her crackling comm, Lieutenant Devron's tense voice announced that the Imperial fleet was set to arrive within the hour. Jade responded with steady calm, telling everyone to stick to their hit-and-run strategies. Her mind was already calculating the possible moves the Empire could make. When the first enemy ships pierced the atmosphere, sending a thunderous shockwave through the air, Jade's unit sprang into action. Their equipment was a mixed bag of improvised devices and outdated hardware, but Jade didn't care. She knew the terrain, every hill and crag, every secret passage once used by ancient Helian tribes. The Imperial soldiers landed with a mechanical precision that almost looked rehearsed, and their confidence was obvious to anyone watching. Jade's team kept hidden until the perfect moment. When she pushed the detonator, mines scattered along a narrow ravine erupted in a brilliant flash. Chaos engulfed the Imperials. In the confusion, Jade's squad unleashed a torrent of gunfire before melting away into the underbrush. They left nothing but puzzled and shaken Imperial troops in their wake. Back at the newly established Imperial base, Commander Saryn approached General Urex's command tent. Grumbles and shouts could be heard from within. Reports of the day's embarrassment had already reached the general. Saryn found the general prowling around the tent, frustration pulsing in every stomp. This was supposed to be an easy mission, but these so-called primitives had hit them hard, exploiting the forests in ways the Imperials hadn't anticipated. Saryn, trying to remain neutral, advised caution. The Helian terrain was perfect for guerrilla tactics, and their heavy artillery was mostly useless among thick trees and twisting vines. But General Urex brushed off the suggestion, insisting on an even larger assault. Saryn's gut twisted, realizing how disastrous this one-track approach would become. He left the tent with no choice but to follow orders, inwardly vowing to find a path that might spare the Empire and Helia needless bloodshed. Night settled over Helia. In a worn-down farmhouse lit by a single flickering lamp, Jade gathered her team around a table cluttered with maps. Their victory that day had been a much-needed morale boost, but everyone knew the Empire would come back stronger. Jade detailed the next moves: sabotage runs, trap laying, and how to keep the enemy guessing. Each person listened with unwavering focus. Nobody asked for an easy way out, because they knew there wasn't one. When Sergeant Lien raised the issue of supplies, Jade just nodded and explained they had hidden stashes scattered throughout the hills. They would use whatever they could find. This was their home, after all, and they knew every inch of it. As the group disbanded for a few hours of rest, Jade remained behind, studying the maps long into the night. She was determined not to let Helia become another casualty of Imperial expansion. Meanwhile, Saryn lay awake in his cramped quarters at the Imperial base. He was all too familiar with how pride had led the Empire into reckless wars. He didn't want to see Helia destroyed like so many other worlds. He made a choice he never thought he'd make, to secretly reach out to the Helian resistance. The next morning, as the sun's glow crept over dew-laden fields, he sent a coded message. Captain Jade Rook received it with skepticism. A voice came through her comm, identifying itself as Commander Saryn. "We need to talk," it said. She warned him that any betrayal would be the end of him, and Saryn acknowledged the risk. Then he started feeding her the Empire's movements, weaknesses, and tactical patterns. This knowledge could tip the scales in Helia's favor. It was a turning point Jade hadn't expected. She relayed the data to Lieutenant Devron and the other squad leaders. She asked them to cross-check everything Saryn provided. Could they really trust him? Why would a loyal Imperial officer risk everything to help them? But the intel was too good to ignore. Each new tip proved accurate. Each trap they set, using Saryn's information, battered the Empire's morale further. The Helian fighters began to coordinate surgical strikes. They relied on lightning-fast ambushes, then vanished into the shadows, leaving the Empire's forces either chasing phantoms or licking their wounds in the Imperial base. General Urex's fury knew no bounds. The mounting losses were causing whispers among the troops. How could the greatest empire in the galaxy be outplayed by a planet stuck with centuries-old tech? Urex glared at Saryn in a strategy meeting, demanding an explanation for repeated setbacks. Saryn suggested that maybe Helia's defenders were adapting faster than anticipated. Maybe they needed a different tactic. Urex pounded a metal table with his fist, bellowing that they would simply escalate their offensive until Helia bowed. Saryn hid his unease behind a rigid salute, knowing that each new directive from Urex would only solidify Helia's advantage, because Saryn would leak those orders to Jade. But the walls were closing in. Urex's paranoia soared, and he began to suspect a traitor. Saryn recognized the severity of the risk he was taking. Each time he slipped information to the Helian rebels, he inched closer to being discovered. Jade, for her part, couldn't deny the results. Saryn's tips were proving essential. Each carefully orchestrated ambush left the Imperials scrambling. She found herself acknowledging Saryn's courage. "He's helping us in ways no one else could," she said one night when talking to her close advisor. The advisor reminded her they couldn't fully trust him. He might turn on them when it was most convenient for the Empire. Jade agreed but pointed out that his intelligence had saved countless Helian lives. With the Imperials on the back foot, Jade planned something bigger than the usual ambush. Her fighters were no longer just defending. They were moving to capture vital Imperial assets. Saryn revealed a golden opportunity, a heavily guarded supply convoy essential to keeping the Imperial invasion afloat. Jade's plan was simple in design, but complicated in execution. Lure the convoy into a narrow pass, then hit it from all sides. The operation required everyone, every scout, sniper, and demolition expert. Once the convoy arrived, the Helian force fired everything they had. Explosives hammered the ridge, toppling rocks, and cutting off the convoy's only escape route. The Imperials tried to form a shield wall, but they were overwhelmed. Their supply vehicles went up in flames. In minutes, the Empire's carefully laid logistics crumbled. Word traveled at light speed. Helia's defenders had destroyed an Imperial convoy that was supposed to be unbeatable. This single victory shifted more than just resources. It shook the Empire's sense of invincibility. General Urex's rage was now uncontainable. He knew there was a leak, and he promised to find the traitor. Meanwhile, morale on Helia soared. For the first time, many began to believe they could actually force the Empire to withdraw. During a rare lull in the fighting, Jade got back in touch with Saryn. She told him about the convoy takedown. There was no prideful gloating in her voice, just a humble sense of relief. Saryn seemed quietly satisfied, but the tension was obvious in every word. He confessed that Urex was hunting for a spy, and it was only a matter of time before suspicion fell on him. Jade, grateful for what he'd done, promised they would do whatever it took to help him if the Empire tried to punish him. Saryn let out a soft laugh and said, "I've already crossed the line. If it keeps Helia safe, I'll bear whatever consequences come my way." While Saryn faced mounting threats within the Empire, Jade assembled a coalition of Helian resistance cells. Some were led by local village elders, others by small paramilitary groups who had been waiting years for an event like this. Combining all these factions under one command wasn't easy, but Jade's recent string of successes made people willing to listen. She shared crucial intel, courtesy of Saryn, and urged them to coordinate. No longer would they fight as isolated groups. They were forging a united force that could strike the Empire in several places at once. All across Helia, stories began to spread about how Helian fighters were making the Empire bleed. In hidden bunkers, over crackling radios, and in hushed conversations by underground campfires, tales of improbable Helian bravery captivated hearts. Some recalled a single sniper who pinned down an entire platoon of Imperial shock troopers. Others whispered about an unassuming Helian engineer who rigged a decoy that led an Imperial squad straight into quicksand. Each story was more incredible than the last, fueling the belief that Helia might not only survive, but actually stand triumphant. General Urex tried new methods to regain lost ground. He unleashed advanced aerial drones equipped with scanning tech, hoping to spot ambushes from above. However, Helian rebels began utilizing old communication lines and traveling through underground tunnels that had been abandoned centuries ago. Each attempt to corner the rebels ended in more lost Imperial soldiers and scattered vehicles with no one to capture. The Empire found itself outmaneuvered at every turn. Meanwhile, Ral Corvin, the old war hero who had initially warned the Aurelion Council, watched the fiasco from afar. He had been left out of active command, his advice dismissed as fear-mongering. But after hearing the relentless reports of Helian successes, he felt vindicated. He decided it was time to confront General Urex in person. On arriving at the main Imperial camp, Ral found Urex in an uproar, tearing into his advisors with accusations of incompetence. Ral stepped forward and offered to help rectify the Empire's mistakes. Urex, resentful yet desperate, asked if Ral had a magic solution. Ral replied that the Empire could open negotiations, or at least try a ceasefire. Urex's eyes blazed. The very suggestion was heresy in his mind. They were the Aurelion Empire, after all. They bowed to no one, frustrated. Ral turned to Commander Saryn for an explanation. Why was Helia proving so formidable? Saryn's expression was guarded as he casually mentioned that Helia's defenders weren't relying on big weapons or fancy machinery. They fought with adaptability, cunning, and intimate knowledge of a land. But Ral's own instincts told him there was more going on behind the scenes. He suspected Saryn might know the Helian side more deeply than an Imperial officer ever should. Yet he kept these suspicions to himself. If Saryn was feeding Helia information, Ral saw that as the Empire's just deserts for its arrogance. Maybe it would teach them a lesson. At the same time, Jade prepared for what she believed could be the final confrontation. She had gotten word that General Urex was amassing everything he had left for a full-scale assault on several Helian strongholds. She and her closest advisors mapped out each potential battlefield. With Saryn's tips on the Empire's deployment times and routes, they devised a layered defense. Some fighters would engage the Imperials in smaller skirmishes, wearing them down. Others would draw them into narrow valleys, where improvised artillery would bury them under landslides. It was a patchwork strategy that required perfect timing. The day of the big push dawned with storm clouds rolling over Helia's jagged mountain ranges. Imperial dropships, bristling with troops, soared across the sky like a swarm of mechanical locusts. Tanks rumbled through battered roads, their cannons scanning for targets. Helian scouts relayed every move to Jade's command post. She stayed calm, moving units around like pieces on a chessboard. The first clash erupted in a muddy river gorge. Helian fighters rigged the banks with hidden explosives. When the Imperial tanks advanced, the ground beneath them crumbled. Water rushed in, swallowing metal hulls and scattering infantry. The battle lines fell into disarray. But Jade's teams didn't stay in one spot. They melted into the thick undergrowth, popping up minutes later on a ridge to hit the Imperial flank. It was a dance that seemed almost choreographed. Appear, attack, vanished in another sector. A forward Imperial brigade tried to storm a Helian bunker network. They brought flamethrowers and heavy artillery, expecting to burn out any resistance. But they encountered only empty corridors. Confused, they ventured deeper until they realized the floors beneath them were wired with booby traps. When the traps detonated, half the brigade was cut off, and the survivors were forced to retreat under sniper fire from vantage points carefully chosen in advance. Every hour brought new news of Imperial setbacks. Yet, General Urex refused to recall his troops. He ordered them to keep pushing, ignoring the heavy casualties. Panic seeped into his strategy. Commanders who dared to question him got threatened with court-martial. Raoul Corvin tried one last time to propose negotiations, only to be dismissed yet again. Urex blamed weak-willed advisors for all their failures. Meanwhile, Saryn became certain he would be exposed. One of Urex's intelligence officers had narrowed down the list of possible informants to just a handful of high-ranking individuals. Saryn's name was at the top. Moments before the final assault, Saryn managed to send a coded message to Jade, warning her that he might not make it out. He told her the Empire was planning to land a fresh wave of troops on Helia's southern continent, hoping to outflank the main Helian force. Jade thanked him and assured him that everything he had done would be remembered. Saryn gave no reply, but Jade imagined he was preparing for the worst. She swiftly mobilized more squads to the southern continent, setting up a row of hidden artillery positions that faced the coastline. When the new Imperial forces landed, anticipating an easy victory, they were met with a relentless bombardment. Helian fighters, positioned on high cliffs, picked off stragglers. The battered Imperials had nowhere to go. Their flight path was cut off by Helian interceptors, rickety old planes that had been retrofitted for dogfights. Though less advanced, they flew with an unrivaled daring that Imperial pilots simply could not match. Under this suffocating pressure, the Empire's grand offensive collapsed. Soldiers deserted in growing numbers. Some squads laid down their arms, surrendering en masse. Helia had become a quagmire that devoured any force the Empire threw at it. General Urex, however, still refused to accept defeat. From his command center, he tried to rally the last remnants of his army for a final push. That moment never came. Word reached him that the High Council of the Aurelion Empire had decided enough was enough. With supply lines obliterated, morale in tatters, and an entire fleet pinned down by a far weaker foe, the cost of continuing the invasion grew too high, even for the Empire. They issued a retreat order. Urex fumed and cursed the council, but there was no choice. The Aurelion Empire pulled out of Helia as abruptly as they had arrived, leaving behind smoldering wreckage and a battered invasion force that was grateful just to be leaving alive. When Jade and her fighters confirmed the Empire's withdrawal, celebrations erupted in every hidden bunker and cratered village. Families emerged from shelters, hugging loved ones. The planet had survived what everyone believed would be unstoppable conquest. Meanwhile, Jade privately wondered about Saryn. She asked her communications officer to keep scanning for any message from him, but days passed with no reply. In the midst of Helia's relief, Commander Saryn was forced to face the Empire's wrath. He was identified as the Leak, arrested, and brought before a military tribunal. Yet stories spread that some Imperial soldiers quietly admired Saryn's courage, admitting that the campaign on Helia had been misguided from the start. Tales hinted that one night, sympathetic guards might have helped him slip away, or that he vanished under mysterious circumstances. Regardless, Jade believed Saryn had earned Helia's respect and, in her mind, an honorary place among those who fought for the planet's freedom. Raoul Corvin also departed Helia with a heavy heart. His warnings had come true, but they had fallen on deaf ears. He submitted a final report to the High Council, emphasizing that the Empire needed to respect the unpredictability and resilience of so-called lesser planets. Whether they would actually learn from this humiliation remained uncertain. But one truth was undeniable. Helia had shown that no empire, no matter how advanced, could stand unchallenged forever. For the people of Helia, the invasion was a story of survival and defiance. They had faced an enemy that saw them as barely above animals and forced that enemy to retreat in shame. Victory had come at steep cost. Cities lay in ruins, and many brave fighters would never return to their families. Yet, as the dust settled, a new sense of unity blossomed among the survivors. Communities rebuilt together. Folks who had once lived in remote regions emerged to help with repairs and share food. Farmers taught city dwellers how to cultivate tough plants that could grow in war-scarred soil. Engineers used the debris of Imperial machines to craft new tools and, in some cases, new innovations that blended Helian resourcefulness with pieces of advanced Imperial tech. Travelers on Helia's battered roads often exchanged stories of how a small band of rebels outmaneuvered the greatest empire in the galaxy. They told of explosive ambushes, cunning distractions, and carefully laid traps in old mines and forest trails. They remembered Jade Rook as the captain who never backed down, not even when the Empire rained fire from the sky. They recalled Commander Saryn, the Imperial officer who risked everything to help the Helians. And they never forgot Ral Corvin, a hero in his own right, whose pleas for caution echoed long before the Empire set foot on Helia. The legend grew, spreading from Helia to other corners of space. Word reached scattered worlds that if Helia could stand up to the Aurelion Empire, maybe they could, too. It became a rallying cry for every planet that had once been too scared to resist. And in the back corridors of Imperial power, officials scratched their heads, wondering how such a primitive planet could outwit them so completely. Some cynics warned that the Empire would strike again, perhaps with a deadlier force. Others believed the Empire's leaders might reflect on Helia's example and start treading more carefully. Yet for Helia, the invasion was over, and they had won. Life slowly returned to a kind of normal, though that normal was forever changed. Fields that had been battlefields now had kids playing with makeshift toys crafted from bits of Imperial drones. Ruined temples were rebuilt with combined efforts of people from once distant regions, forging friendships that transcended old boundaries. Through it all, Jade Rook continued her role as a protector. Whenever local disputes flared up, she reminded everyone that unity was what had saved them. The Empire's defeat wasn't just a victory on a battlefield. It was a testament to what Helians could achieve if they stood together. And as for Commander Saryn, rumors persisted that he was out there, wandering the galaxy under a new identity, helping others in need. Sometimes folks claimed they spotted someone matching his description, and legends started swirling about a mysterious figure who warned unsuspecting worlds about the Empire's appetite for conquest. That is the story of how Helia, dismissed and derided by a mighty empire, held on to its freedom. A place once seen as backward ended up teaching the galaxy a lesson in resilience and collaboration. Underestimating Helia turned out to be one of the Empire's greatest blunders, a warning to any power that believed advanced ships and weaponry were all it took to claim victory. In the end, ingenuity, teamwork, and a fearless spirit were more potent than any high-tech arsenal. And maybe that's the real takeaway. A determined few can stand against a juggernaut if they know their land, trust one another, and dare to fight for what's right. Whether the Aurelion Empire learned anything is hard to say, but for Helia, this triumph was more than an escape from oppression. It was a new beginning. Their story spread, inspiring countless others who dreamed of living free from Imperial commands. It proved that even the mightiest empire can be humbled when its arrogance blinds it to the hearts and minds of those it tries to conquer. And that, in the end, is why Helia's soldiers still stand as a symbol of courage and hope for every world yearning to break its chains.